Moscow insiders revealed Vladimir Putin is often misled about the front line to help others earn medals and awards. When Vladimir Putin easily rejected the Christmas truce and attacked Ukrainian peaceful cities right on Christmas night, many in the West wondered why. It seems the West is applying pressure. At the front, especially in Kupiansk, Russia's supposed gains are reversing, and its overheated economy has left the central bank unsure how much to raise interest rates. It makes sense to pause to avoid losing already captured territories. Like if Putin had stopped there a week ago, he could have, for example, kept the occupation of Kupiansk. But Moscow officially responded to the Christmas truce. Now what's wrong? Here comes the Financial Times investigation, which I think clarifies everything. In conclusion, if anyone in Russia believes Putin is a master chess player who skillfully controls the board, that's simply not true. The Financial Times reports, confirmed by intelligence and Kremlin sources. The president of Russia lives in the most expensive and dangerous bubble in history. He simply isn't told the truth. His generals Belousov and Gerasimov have created a system of victory folders for him, where reality is replaced by convenient graphics. Today we'll explain how Putin is being misled, which numbers are being faked for him, and why this web of lies exists. This is the main reason why the war in 2026 might not end with that very peace agreement. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and leave any comment under this video. This really helps a lot in promoting the episodes on YouTube, and I would be grateful to you for that. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. What is the Financial Times covering today? The investigation by the publication clearly states the reporting system in the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has turned into a factory of fakes. The scheme is simple. At every level, from battalion commander to the chief of the general staff, the numbers on losses are doctored, and Russian officers push soldiers into assaults with just one goal: to simply plant the Russian flag. Capture this moment with a drone and send the video to higher command as proof that the Russians have advanced on the front line. And they don't care that literally within minutes, those Russian soldiers will be killed by a Ukrainian drone or even Ukrainian infantry, and the flag will simply be taken down. The idea is to use this video to prove to the generals above that we've captured some territory and that we deserve a medal for it. And the most high-profile case is the Russian army's capture of ghost towns. Do you remember the news about the capture of Kupiansk? So now even Russian Z military correspondents are crying, just crying. They're saying that Kupiansk hasn't been captured at all. It's completely under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine, according to the Financial Times. Putin received a folder saying Kupiansk was already liberated. At that time, fighting was in the industrial zone, while the city was already controlled by the armed forces of Ukraine. But the messenger who brings news of a retreat in the Kremlin doesn't stay around for long. The generals are afraid of anger, so they don't just give Putin cities as gifts for holidays on this topic. The Washington Institute for the Study of War writes in its report that on December 24, one of the Kremlin-linked Russian war correspondents retroactively stated that Russian troops had long since lost not just the city of Kupiansk, but also a significant part of their foothold on the western bank of the Oskil River, since Ukrainian forces recaptured positions directly to the north and northwest of Kupiansk, in Kondrashivka and Radkivka, as well as on the outskirts of Mirove. Moreover, this same war correspondent admits that these three settlements were the only ones that Russian troops actually controlled before the start of the Ukrainian counteroffensives. In recent weeks, despite statements by the Russian military about controlling 11 settlements in this region, and now, Russian war correspondents today are criticizing the Russian military command for exaggerating Russian successes in Kupiansk and its surroundings, as well as for the premature redeployment of reserves from Kupiansk, because the unwashed Russians believed in themselves so much that after entering Kupiansk, they simply removed the reserves. Like, yeah, we've already captured everything. The armed forces of Ukraine definitely won't be able to take this city back. And now Russian war correspondents are whining like, how could this happen? Moreover, Russian war correspondents are already openly saying that the Russian troops of the 27th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade are basically surrounded. As a result, even the Russians admitted that since December 11, the armed forces of Ukraine have liberated an area of 182 square kilometers in the region. This is in the direction of Kupiansk in this sector, but according to reports from the Kremlin and the Russian Ministry of Defense, Kupiansk is still under Russian control. Moreover, Putin stated that there are 3,500 Ukrainian armed forces soldiers surrounded in Kupiansk, and one of the Russian generals was awarded the title of Hero of the Russian Federation the day before for capturing Kupiansk. Russia itself lives on all these fakes. Another point is the destruction of NATO equipment. The Financial Times writes that Putin was informed about Ukraine losing 80% of all Western equipment. In fact, the lion's share of these damaged Abrams, Leopards and so on are actively being repaired in Poland and Germany and are returning to service. But in Putin's folders, the Ukrainian army has already been demilitarized. Just 3 times circling like this, for example, let me remind you during the live Q&A. On December 19, Putin stated that the Russians had destroyed about 215,000 pieces of equipment belonging to the armed forces of Ukraine. Just think about this nonsense. Supposedly the Russians destroyed 215,000 pieces of equipment. I don't know if NATO as a whole even has that much equipment. But the Financial Times reveals the deception extends beyond the front lines to the economy. By the way, Belousov is an economist, and his task was to shift Russia to a wartime economy. He did it, but at what cost? Putin was recently informed about a 3.5% gross domestic product growth and, quote, the unsinkability of the ruble. The Financial Times cites Central Bank of Russia sources, reporting panic within the system. Actual inflation is double the official rate. Generals and officials are hiding from Putin that the defense factories are working under extreme strain on equipment that can't be replaced because of the sanctions. And at some point this entire military machine will simply grind to a halt and won't be able to restart anymore. The Financial Times now reports that Putin is being told the West is weary and Trump will soon end everything. We'll fight just a little longer and we're definitely winning. Meanwhile, Ukraine is actively promoting 20-point peace plans. The United States still promises guarantees and economic incentives, and no one is radically agreeing to reduce the armed forces of Ukraine. Even in Washington, they agreed 800,000 is adequate. But, as the Financial Times writes, Kirill Dmitriev, who communicates with Vitkov, convinced Vladimir Putin that Trump will definitely break up NATO. And you just need to wait a little bit. In the end, it becomes clear why Putin rejected Trump's peace initiatives. The lies of Putin's inner circle create in the dictator Putin himself the feeling that just one more push and everything will definitely collapse. On that same direct line, Putin said, yes, we see that just a little more and that's it. Ukraine will definitely collapse, the West will collapse, everything will collapse. Well, you need to understand that this one more push means another 100,000 Russian corpses. And now we move on to the next point. At the moment highlighted by the Financial Times, these are the losses. It was officially stated to Putin that Russian losses are minimal, with a 1-to-10 ratio favoring Russia over Ukraine's armed forces. Putin claimed that based on his data, Ukraine has lost nearly 1.5 million soldiers. Well, that means, in his head, about 150,000 Russians have died. That's for the entire war, for the whole full-scale war. But according to the Institute for the Study of War and British Intelligence, in 2025 alone, Russia lost about 382,000 killed and wounded, and that's just for this year. The Institute for the Study of War calculated that in 2025, Russia captured 4,669 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, which means Russia lost 83 people for every kilometer of land captured. 83 people. And as the Financial Times writes, the generals are hiding these numbers from Putin, spreading them across different departments, and concealing the number of missing in action. Putin is convinced that he has an endless supply of manpower, which is why he so easily rejected this Christmas truce. In his reality, the Russian Federation's army is like a steel steamroller that doesn't feel pain and keeps moving forward. Finally, I'll answer a simple question. Why do we need to know all this? Well, in order to understand that conversations with Putin today are conversations with a person who doesn't see reality, he just doesn't see it. Any proposals from Trump, Zelensky, Rutte, Macron, and so on crash against this wall of victorious reports from Gerasimov in Putin's mind. Kupiansk is still occupied by the Russians, and as long as Putin believes in this imaginary capture of Kupiansk, this imaginary collapse of the West, unfortunately, he will keep sending people to their deaths. But in the meantime, the West must completely strangle Russia's economy so that it suddenly collapses for Putin once and for all. There is simply no other way. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. Friends, if you found this episode useful and interesting, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with your donation or a paid sponsorship subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I appreciate your support. That's all for now. Take care and goodbye. To be continued.